This is going to be a part 2 to the video about the dude in my class who I mentioned. And I think that video was titled Dude in my class something something something, but I'm going to put it in the description anyway. One thing that I'm pretty sure I mentioned in the other video, since that's kind of what it was about, is that this dude in my class had said that he got the ADHD label. But I've also found out some other stuff that he's told the class. So basically, he has the military family trauma. And I already have another video about this other dude I met back at, well, I don't want to say where, but I think I already said where in the other video, so I'm just going to say, I met him at Job Corps. He went through all types of trafficking. He went through the Cash for Kids system, some of the same parts I did. He got the Asperger's label really young. He was sex trafficked by his family. His dad was in the military, so he was thrown into the boarding school, part of the Cash for Kids system. And his dad made CP and all that stuff that I mentioned in the other video. Well, not the other video, the video about this specific kid. And it reminds me of the dude in my class. Although luckily the dude in my class wasn't sex trafficked and all that. But he did have a military family. He was thrown into the Cash for Kids system. Because then, of course, when you're thrown into the Cash for Kids system, or when you get in there because of your trauma symptoms or just the fact that you have parents who aren't willing to fight for you, you're never really going to just be in one part of the Cash for Kids system. If you're in the mental health system branch of the Cash for Kids system, you've probably already been in it, or are going to be in, or are in the juvenile justice part of the CPS part, or some other part, or like the American school system part, which, I mean, mostly everybody gets forced into that due to laws. If you have abusive parents or no parents at all, which would mean that you're already in the Cash for Kids system because you're in the foster care branch, that will make you get into the Cash for Kids system or get into other branches of the Cash for Kids system. And you'll notice people who have healthy or decent families don't even believe these things exist. Because when you have protection, these abusers can't come for you. And you can't get dragged into these systems and become their cash cow through the American school system. Now, some people do just because they have gullible parents, and then the teachers talk them into putting their kid on psychotropics like ADHD meds or anxiety meds or the other ones. But they quickly take their kids off once they see what those meds actually do. So anyway, what was one thing I wanted to say? So yeah, due to him being in a military family, he was forced into the boarding school part of the Cash for Kids system. Now, I don't know if he was specifically put in a military school or some other type of boarding school, although it seems like boarding schools always revolve around the military or the pagan Roman Catholic Church. So, seems like it's always one of the two. I know he said that the boarding school he went to was in New York, and some other things is that he got brain damage and developed a whole bunch of issues that still affect him to this day from being forced on psychotropics, specifically the ones for ADHD, because he got the ADHD label really young, because of course that's what these systems do. They find different ways to gaslight you and brainwash you into believing you're in this situation because it's your fault and something's wrong with you and you're retarded and all those other labels. And what was something else? Kind of just giving a summary, just like I did for the video about that boy that I met at Job Corps. Oh yeah, he had ended up falling into different addictions because of course that's what happens when you're forced on drugs really young. You commonly end up still being addicted to those same drugs or similar. So he's dealt with coffee addiction, other stuff. Seems like mostly coffee, different drinks basically. And that's what happens. And he mentioned he was living with his mom, and I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming she's one of the people that has something to do with him being thrown into the Cash for Kids system. And that's something that I noticed, which is kind of like the main point of me making this video to get to this part, I noticed that, like, for people like him, and this isn't like to be rude or anything, obviously, but for people like him, due to all the trauma that you, like, develop going through these types of abuse in the Cash for Kids system, and even the side abuse that's taking place, if it wasn't for some people, like, developing really bad cognitive dissonance and still deciding to stay with their abusers, they'd be quote-unquote homeless and all those other terms too, to be honest. That's something that I've noticed. And I'm not trying to, like, be rude or anything, but it's like, I mean, realistically, because like he's even said, he doesn't really have any human contact outside of going to the class. He doesn't really talk to people. And he doesn't really feel like he's good at anything. Something that I noticed about him, similar to me, is that he's like a perfectionist, and he also talks junk about himself a lot. And like, we were doing this project thing where we were making a planner box. He was cursing and talking junk to himself the whole time, but his box looked like he had one of the best projects. Definitely looked way better than mine. My measurements were all types off. I don't even know what happened, to be honest. It was honestly pretty funny. I started trying to put my wood together and screw it and nail it or whatever, and it was not fitting. And he even admits that he learned all the cursing all the time stuff from his dad, and he pretty much feels like he wouldn't really be good at anything to even be able to get a job, but of course he's still trying. And he's pretty similar to me. He's way older than me, though. He's like 30. He's 37. But, yeah. And it kind of goes into the side thing, even for people who may have not necessarily been abused, or at least not by their parents, their family. But it's like people with different, well, with quote-unquote mental illness or trauma or learning disabilities, which, of course, I mean, he already had something like that, I guess, but the psychotropics and the brain damage they caused gave him, like, more or worse issues. And something I noticed for people with, like, healthy families is that, obviously, like, for people with Down syndrome or something like that, if it wasn't for some of them actually having healthy families, they'd also be in these situations where they're spit on and called bums and all that. And of course, if you know anything about the quote unquote homeless community, you'll know that a lot of the people in the homeless community have Down syndrome and other issues like that, where they sometimes aren't really able to do things for themselves, not even because of them, but really just because of how people feel about them, and the fact that people feel like something's quote unquote wrong with them and they're so bad of a person because of whatever issue they have, to where people don't want to help them or hire them. And it kind of reminds me of the stupid thing that goes along with quote unquote homeless stereotypes, which is that you're crazy and on drugs. That stereotype is also used in like other abusive systems, but that's a side thing, because I kind of talk about that every day. And it's almost like if you're busking or you're selling something and you appear to have some type of learning disability or mental illness or whatever, it's like people don't want to buy anything from you because they don't want to give you money, because it's like they feel like they're enabling you, as if you're gonna like buy more mental illness and learning disability, which I know that makes no sense, but this just like the thought process some people have, because they say things like they're homeless people are quote unquote all crazy and on drugs, and if you give them any money for anything, you're enabling them, and it's just going to make their issues worse. And it's like, I mean, what are people doing? Buying more mental illness? Hopefully that made sense. It's just something funny that I thought about earlier. And I kind of thought about it a couple times throughout the weeks. It's kind of, well, honestly, that's not why, but now it's it's another reason why I don't really like selling my art, but I've gotten more like used to it. I know originally I was really embarrassed about holding up a sign to try to sell my art, because even though I was selling something, I still didn't want to hold up a sign because I mean, it's like, one, people don't even read them, so they just feel like you're begging them for stuff. And it's just people, just the way people react makes it embarrassing, even though it doesn't really have to be, because, I mean, I'm selling stuff. It's still a sad situation, though. And he makes me think of that mafia dude, or that boy that I made that video about. Somewhat similar situation. In fact, I think he said he's even been in other parts of TTIs, or at least his friends have. He had friends that were sent to ranches. And that's something that I noticed. Rich people, they don't spend time with their kids. And I mean, some people know this, but a lot of people don't. They're like the main ones sending their kids to these different parts of the Cash for Kids system. Like, the ones that cost a whole bunch of money. So the kid spends like years of their life in boarding schools and TTIs, and then they spend their summers in summer camps, and it's just terrible. I mean, imagine like growing up, spending your whole life till 18 or maybe even older, locked up on some military school campus. I mean, think about that. And imagine spending your whole childhood in a mental facility for no reason. Which, I mean, at the end of the day, mental illness comes from trauma, so it's never going to be your fault. It's always going to be somebody else that deserves to be locked up compared to you, the person who messed you up. I mentioned this girl one time before. So, there's this girl that I met, and she's in a common situation that people around here go through that I call white supremacist taming, which happens in CPS, where kids of different ethnicities, whether they're Asian or from Africa or whatever, they're put in some rich white supremacist family, and then the family sex traffics them, or they just abuse them. And then they like get brainwashed and taught a whole bunch of crap. And it's like, even though a lot of people are what I would call Willie Lynch syndrome house niggers, and they raise their kids in pretty messed up ways, it's still just certain stuff that makes like that and the white supremacist taming different, obviously. But well, yeah, and also it kind of makes me think of like the mixed kid trauma, but it still ends up way worse with way worse effects. But anyway, back to the point. So this girl was from Egypt. She's, well, the new people that have been like ruling there for however long it's been. So she's Arabic. She was in boarding schools when she lived in Africa. And then she was adopted by some rich white family from the boarding schools. And I guess she felt some type of way about her. Maybe they just ended up not wanting her, because that happens all the time too, obviously. But she may have even had some adjustment issues for obvious reasons when you're being taken against your will by some people you don't know in a language you probably don't even understand, to be trafficked by CPS all the way to America. And I can only imagine what type of stuff happened in the boarding school. But yeah, so she was brought to America, and then after a while, the family just decided that they didn't want her anymore, so they put her in CPS custody. And of course, what that means is that she ends up homeless as a kid, because, I mean, the system is how it is, and then the kids end up turned out, confused, and then they end up with the ADHD label and whatever else. And she's fallen to the common trap that not just people in the Cash for Kids system, but people who go through abuse in general end up in. Did I say that right? I don't know. But she ended up looking for parent figures. And of course, when abused kids, whether they're like homeless by themselves or they're still in their abuse situation, living with their relatives or parents. It's so common for abused kids to like fall into these quote unquote relationships with chomos and amphibiophiles because of course these mental health professionals that make these labels for these different sexual things, they want to put emphasis now that a pedophile is someone who's attracted to prepubescent kids. So apparently you're supposed to call them amphibophiles because prepubescent, at least for females, I don't really know for guys, that would be like younger than 8. So if you're like a teenager on a and you like 8-year-olds, that's okay, but it's not okay if you like somebody who's 7. But of course their end goal is to legalize all of it anyway, which it kind of already is, since none of these people go to jail anyway or get charged, but they want to make it openly legal. But back to the point. So these kids end up in these relationships with different types of chomos because they want a parent figure, but also even a closer connection. So they end up basically trying to date somebody that's like a parent, and they end up in relationships with chomos that will give them rides to school. They commonly end up having a kid by whether they're male or female, but commonly when it's a female, they end up abandoned with the kid, and then also their parents end up disowning them if they still live with their parents, and then they go through even more abuse for having the kid from being molested, if I can even say that on here. And then those types of people commonly end up becoming narcs. And then if it's a dude, the female commonly ends up keeping the kid just because of like sexist laws around who can see their baby. So yeah, luckily she didn't get pregnant though, but she fell into the trap of dating pedos. And so she's just been homeless, of course, living in her car, because that's what the foster care system does to you, or worse, it has you 13 living under bridges, or depending on what state you're in, if you're at least if you're a girl, I don't really know what they do for the guys, but in certain states they commonly put the girls in hotel rooms and tell them that if they want money to eat and to buy pads and tissue, they need a prostitute. So yeah, she just hangs around a whole bunch of weird old dudes. And that's irrelevant to what I was originally talking about with the dude in my class, but that made me think of this, and I have been wanting to mention this whole situation because it's just different situations I see people and the proof points that I've been making on here for years. Not even just on this channel, but even when I was doing the abuse evidence videos. And it's like every day I just see more and more everything that I've been saying for years is right. And like I've been saying, my situation wasn't unique. These are literally how these systems make their money. Because I remember there were some people that used to feel like I was in some weird, strange situation that was rare. And I'd have to let people know nothing about the situation I was in was rare. Literally everybody who's locked up in these different parts of the Cash for Kids system is in the same situation I'm in, or similar. Obviously similar enough for us to be in there. Lastly, I wanted to say that kids who grow up in these systems, whether it's being in a military family, being in the Cash for Kids system, like foster care, juvenile justice, quote unquote justice, the mental health system, TTI. Did I already say TTIs? I might have already said that. Boarding schools, might have already said that. All the other branches. Even just regular, well, I mean, I guess it is regular normalized. So even just a regular abuse situation, kids commonly end up developing attachment issues like fearful avoidant, dismissive avoidant, all those other things that I can't remember the name of and get mixed up. And I noticed, just like with kids whose parents work alike, kids who grow up in military families and get sent to these boarding schools, or even if they don't, they commonly end up with ASPD or BPD. And of course, you get BPD from attachment issues and not being able to really have like a real relationship, emotional connection to your parents, which is why I've had the BPD attachment symptoms. Wait, yeah, not symptoms. Is this? Yeah, throughout my life. So, like in elementary, especially, I remember limb secessions. What's other things? I mean, of course, I was going to be a codependent just due to the trauma in general and having an ARC family system. So there was a codependency, the limb secessions. Barely pronouncing this. What's other thing? What's other? It was something else. Oh yeah, no, I already said that. I was gonna say favorite persons, but limb secessions, and that's the same thing. And I don't know, just attachment issues in general. Can't remember the names for all these different things because, like, it's been a while since I even looked into all that stuff. Because I spent from like 2020 when I woke up and found the clinical terms for my situation till like 2022, I spent that time researching my trauma symptoms and all that. But now I can barely remember half of that stuff. But yeah, so you get those issues. And I remember that boy who I made that video about who was trafficked by his military family, he even had like fearful or dismissive avoidant attachment style. I probably even kind of do, but I just, I don't know. I don't like to talk to people for other reasons, though, really. Not even because of that. Because, for one, people are just into a lot of stuff these days that I'm not. And I'm also never around people my age. And then the third thing is, due to the situations I'm in, I attract people that I definitely would need to stay away from. Especially the let me help you lunatic type people. It's like not only are they toxic, but they're just overall really annoying. But yeah, kids who grew up in military families commonly will end up with ASPD or BPD. No, honestly, I don't know how everybody doesn't come out with BPD. Oh, I'm falling asleep. Did I run out of recording time? Oh, no, I didn't. And then that's it. Okay, no, I forgot one thing. I didn't even think about this. But kids who grow up in military families will also commonly end up with schizophrenia. Because, I mean, even the parents do. Especially the parent or the relative that's actually in the military. Due to all the trauma-based mind control they go through in the U.S. military. To even be turned into a killer. To go out and do the things that they do to all these innocent people over a whole bunch of lies. So, not only do the parents end up with schizophrenia from being in the military, but the kids commonly come out with schizophrenia and paranoia too.